Hello guys, welcome back. This is going to be part 3 of the Amenorrhea series that I started several weeks ago, or back in February maybe. I've done part 1 and part 2, and then this is going to be part 3 where I'll be addressing more questions. I'm happy to do more parts, especially down the road if you guys have more questions and more topics that you want me to talk about. This is a topic I've gotten a huge response on, a topic that I think is way under discussed in the healthcare community, and also medical providers are, as a whole, I would say very undereducated on. So it's something that I'm super passionate about. It's a huge driver of why I went back to school from being an RD to become an NP. And so if you have more questions, please send them my way at robincole@gmail.com. Part 1 and part 2 we've already done, and then today we're going to go into part 3, where I'm mainly going to be talking about the hormones that make up kind of the first and second phase and how to balance that. So let's hop right into questions. I got a question about increasing progesterone naturally, which is not necessarily a simple question. It's not really a quick fix. So there's kind of two main parts to your menstrual cycle. You have the first stage and you have the second stage, and which is separated then in between by ovulation, which happens, if we give one day, we're going to say day 14, right in the middle, right? So the first part of your menstrual cycle is actually predominated, is predominated a word? I don't know, dominated by estrogen, okay? The second part of your menstrual cycle is more dominated by progesterone. And so you have the first stage, which is really the follicular phase, and you have the second phase, which is the luteal phase, and that is then separated in the middle by ovulation. And so what happens is that when women have low progesterone levels, your uterine lining does not thicken enough to be able to hold a fertilized egg for implantation. So pregnancy obviously therefore cannot occur. It's why they give you the progesterone challenge, like Provera, right? A lot of doctors will give you that to see if you will bleed after that, and that is essentially simulating that second stage. You take the Provera, you increase your levels of progesterone in your body, then you stop taking it, so therefore progesterone levels drop, and they will see if you will bleed. That's kind of a side note on what that is doing. And so when you have low progesterone levels, essentially your body is not at a place where it can, or your uterus is not in a place where an egg can implant, and you cannot therefore carry a pregnancy. So restoring those low levels is a little bit complex yet simple all at once. And so I am not a huge fan of supplements. I don't think that you can just take a bunch of supplements and solve all your problems. It comes down to figuring out what lifestyle factors are contributing to the problem, and then going ahead and fixing those. And so what that really comes down to is good nutrition. It comes down to reducing exercise. If that's needed, exercise is actually stressful. Exercise causes cortisol levels to rise in your body. And if your body cannot tolerate those levels of cortisol, it will shut down your menstrual cycle. I want to say menstrual system, reproductive system, menstrual cycle. And also getting plenty of sleep. People don't realize how much cortisol rises when you don't get plenty of sleep. And so those main things are what I tell people to naturally increase progesterone, right? If your progesterone levels are low, if your estrogen levels are low, that is going to wreak havoc on your menstrual cycle. And so it's not a quick fix. It's not one supplement. It's not one thing. It's a lot of things based on your individual circumstances, what needs to happen in your life to get those hormones back into balance so you can have a healthy menstrual cycle. Secondly, that was a question I got from, I think, 2 different readers about how to increase these progesterone levels naturally. So that is the answer to that question that I hope is helpful. I also got another question about reducing PMS symptoms. It's a question actually I get often. Very, very mild, non-life altering PMS symptoms are completely normal. For me, for example, I tend to get a little bit of low back pain. Is it debilitating? No. Is it a little annoying? Yes. But if you're getting menstrual cycle symptoms, PMS symptoms that are causing you to stay home from work, that cause you not to be able to focus, that are debilitating to your life, that's a problem. And usually that happens when your hormones are out of balance, because if everything is in sync like it should be, FSH is good, estrogen's good, LH is good, progesterone's good, you really shouldn't be that debilitated by your menstrual cycle. It's annoying, right? Because you're still bleeding from your vagina, but it shouldn't like alter your life that much. If you're getting really, really long cycles, more than a week, where it's really heavy bleeding and clotting, and you're saturating pads and tampons to where you can't, go to work without freaking out that you're bleeding through your pants, that's a problem. And so I would definitely encourage you to seek help from a medical provider to figure out why that might be going on. And so PMF symptoms are the same thing. They're an imbalance of your menstrual cycle hormones that's causing then, literature shows it interacts with brain chemicals, which then cause these sort of symptoms that go on. So that goes down to the same things, figuring out why those things are in balance. And typically it comes back to lifestyle. So I always encourage women to look at, okay, what does nutrition look like? What does sleep look like? What does stress look like? What does exercise look like? Because oftentimes increasing exercise can exacerbate those symptoms, causes more stress on the body, which then wreaks more havoc on your hormones, which causes, your PMS symptoms to worsen. So I can't articulate in this video some one-size-fits-all of what's going to help you reduce your menstrual symptoms, but I would encourage you to look at the kind of those main 4 areas: sleep, what does life stress look like, what does exercise stress look like, and what does nutrition look like, and figuring out where you can kind of alter those a little bit to bring them back into a more homeostasis, so therefore your hormones are more back into balance and you're not getting those debilitating symptoms. Birth control is not the answer for that. There's not a one quick supplement that works for that. Chasteberry is one supplement. I think that's how you say that. I either say chasteberry or chasteberry. I think it's chasteberry. Is one supplement. There is some literature on that it could be helpful with reducing some of those symptoms, but again, there's no literature that is conclusive on supplements, and I tend to shy away from them simply because I am way more about lifestyle. A supplement is kind of a natural band-aid in my opinion, and so if we can fix it through lifestyle, that's always going to be better. Now, I always want to say in these videos, nothing I say is going to override any sort of medical advice, or there is always going to be the possibility of a medical abnormality. And so that's always important to recognize. And you have to go get all of those cleared and ruled out by your physician before you can say, okay, nothing medical, like actually medical pathology, that's a structural problem or something like that, that's not related to lifestyle, is the problem. So I hope that answers that. I know it's a very general answer, but that's really the answer. That's really my advice. I also want to touch on one thing as we wrap up this video, because I don't like to make these too long, is I get a lot of emails from women who have been diagnosed with PCOS, and that's not actually the diagnosis. And so there's a lot of things that have to go into working up and diagnosing hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is why often women end up frustrated after a couple of years of being pinned from doctor to doctor, to reproductive endocrinologist, to another doctor, this test run, that ultrasound, with no answer. And so it's hard to diagnose, and it's especially hard to diagnose if your healthcare provider isn't that well informed. At the grace of the healthcare provider, there is a lot of information to know about the human body, and especially as a primary care provider, where you're really expected to know a wide variety of things, especially as a family nurse practitioner. I am licensed to practice from birth to death. That's a lot that happens in between there. And so we can't know everything about everything. And so I don't want to just bash healthcare providers because they don't know about this, because there's a lot to know about the human body. We all can't be experts about everything, especially if you're a primary care provider. You're not like a cardiologist who has that like one expertise. So that's my little rally for the profession. And I want to give people in the profession just like a lot of grace, because there's a lot to know. So anyways, when you get worked up, there's a lot of lab work that should be done. I recommend that people get a full female hormone panel, a thyroid panel, a serum prolactin, a DHEAS, a testosterone, all of these things that we need to get in order to rule out other things that could be causing amenorrhea, and rule in things as well. And so there's that. Also, a pelvic ultrasound is always important, and a transvaginal ultrasound. So either, depending on what they're trying to rule in or rule out, will depend on what kind of ultrasound you get. But my point here being, the difference between, you know, PCOS and HA is that they can actually present pretty similarly unless you dig a little bit deeper and you're able to look at the whole picture and decide what it really is. But I feel like, and this is just a general statement based on what I've seen in my experience in my, you know, short 27 years of life, but a lot of women that get diagnosed with PCOS actually have HA. So they're women that get diagnosed with what we call like a lean PCOS, meaning they don't have one of the very common presenting factors, which is overweight or obesity. They don't have that. They're actually a normal BMI, but they have polycystic ovaries and they also have amenorrhea. And so oftentimes we see that people with HA actually get diagnosed with PCOS. So I would say if you've had an ultrasound done, there have been tons of follicles on your ovaries, and you've also been amenorrhea, your doctor said that you have PCOS, and you haven't had the full workup or the full scope, I would certainly encourage you to go get that further worked up and to figure out what it actually really is. Because oftentimes I find that people are getting diagnosed with PCOS when it was actually HA to begin with, which then prolongs the diagnosis period to when they're actually getting a conclusive diagnosis, which then obviously is going to prolong the treatment and the healing and the recovery. And so that's kind of my little tidbit on that, is to make sure we're getting the full picture of things and being able to figure out what it actually is. Is it PCOS or is it just hypothalamic amenorrhea? And so I think that's really important. I've worked with clients who've come to me saying, I've been diagnosed with PCOS. It actually wasn't that. It was HA. So anyways, I hope this is helpful. I hope that in between all my ramblings and this and that, it's helpful for you guys. I know there's a lot of information to know. I'm just giving you a little bit in a little 10-minute video. But I hope you have a great week. Please send me questions if you have more. And we'll talk soon.